are recording.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Welcome, everybody, to Office Hours number 11. This week, we have some special guests that are going to be joining us after our ETH Node Watch section. So we're just going to get into some of the regular discussion topics, and then we'll maybe take a segue into a new segment called Indexer Stories, where we'll have a chat with the guys from Index Africa. So just to kick us off today, with our usual ETH Node Watch section, there's not much to talk about this week, thankfully. Regarding Ethereum, there's no official announcements if you check the Ethereum Foundation blog page around the London upgrade, but I believe they are aiming for mid-July at the moment for deployment, and it's going to be what they're calling a lean release with only 4 EIPs included, including the heralded EIP 1559 that everybody is very interested to see implemented.
I have a question about the ETH stuff before we start. Do we know actually, like, when did the gas limit for blocks got increased? Was it during Berlin upgrade?
After Berlin, was it not? It was Peter from Go Ethereum, right, who was sort of kicked that off. Chris, I don't know if you have any history on it.
Yeah, so the block gas limit is not actually a parameter that is determined by the node, node operators, or it's effectively, or I should say node developers. It's a parameter determined by miners. So miners obviously submit transactions through Geth nodes, but they effectively decide how much gas goes into the blocks. So that's really something they decided to do. I'm trying to remember who was the first miner to announce that they were doing so. Anyway, that happened. Yeah, let me have a quick look. I'll drop the tweet that announced it in the chat.
So this is something, so you said that's something miners are actually responsible for.
Correct. Yeah. So that parameter is not baked into the chain consensus rules or into the client implementations. It's literally a parameter that the miners decide when they submit blocks to the network.
Got it. Personally, it's been interesting the changes that plus the proliferation of the work that Flashbots are doing around MEV. Seems to have had an interesting impact on the way, all of these, like Etherscan, for example, probably has some kind of, the way they're doing calculations around prediction of how long it might take for your transaction to go through seems to be wildly inaccurate now. So, you could be putting through a transaction at what you might imagine to be sort of the new standard gas level. But then when you look on Etherscan, the predictions just fluctuate all over the place. And then it might tell you it's going to take hours. And then the next minute it's telling you it's going to take 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden your transaction has been confirmed. It seems like there's some work needs to be done around whatever they use to predict that. So that it's more accurate again.
Look, so Chris sent a Twitter post from Sparkpool. They said they raised the gas limit to 50 million, and other miners quickly followed. This is cool.
Right. Okay, what else do I have here on Ethereum related or blockchain related node stuff? TurboGeth have incremented again. They're on 2021 0404 alpha now. I haven't listed out the changes because nothing there looked particularly interesting to my relatively layman eye when it comes to these things. One question I wanted to ask, and I'm hoping somebody here is more familiar with it, but when I'm out and about browsing Twitter or Reddit or wherever I go to look and consume Ethereum related news, I'm seeing the Besu client come up a lot more in discussions, and I'm wondering if that's something that anyone have a feel for that client, and whether or not we should be tracking it here as a potential client that we may eventually be able to use.
Yeah, do you hear me or?
Yeah, can hear you, Cohen.
Excellent. Yeah, I started to sync it, I think somewhere between 2 and 3 months ago, and it's still at block 8 million. So that's pretty much what my experience so far is. It looks interesting, especially because they're enterprise focused, but their initial sync is crazy slow, and this is a known issue, and it's not anywhere near on their priority to fix.
Yeah, Besu is used quite a bit in private chain deployments where, huge transaction histories are just less of an issue, or they do state snapshotting or things like that. But yeah, as Cohen said, Besu is really enterprise focused, and there are a lot of features in the Besu client that other clients don't have around, kind of like enterprise grade orchestration and instrumentation. I do think, obviously it's written in Java, so the JVM just has very inherent, performance limitations. But I think the quality of the code base is very high. And if you look at the equivalent Ethereum 2 client, Teku, by the same team, I believe, again, performance isn't great, but if you look at the attestation rate on the Beacon chain, Teku just kills everything else. So the quality of these clients is pretty high.
Interesting. So Teku, that's consensus then, right? Is it from last time I
Yep.
looked? I'm sure Teku was a consensus implementation. Okay. So what's the? Is it Coda? Is that the name of the enterprise chain here, Chris? Where this started?
No, Besu is used in what is now called Consensus Quorum. That was previously JP Morgan Quorum. So yeah, just kind of private consortia deployments of Ethereum.
Got it.
Yeah, maybe something to know if you're starting if you want to stink it, is that your logs will fill up with things that look like errors but are actually not errors. It's just about some block that is not accepted or something, and it prints out huge errors. And I, for one, previously assumed that something was wrong in the syncing process, but everything is chugging along quite okay. So that's something to take in mind, that the logs that you might see might not be the error that you think it is.
I wouldn't call it quite okay if you waited 3 months to get it to block 8 million. So
yeah, but there is no issue. There's a performance issue. There is a speed issue, but it's not that it's stalling. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It's just doing it frustratingly slow. So I agree that the speed is a problem for our use case. But it's just to say that when you look at the logs, you might think that something is jamming or stuck or whatever, but that might actually not be the case.
But do you know why is it so slow? Like, I understand they have more features and stuff than other nodes, but is that the issue they have? Like, is it one of their features that makes it so slow?
It's a complex issue, of course. Performance is never simple, but it is a Java application. So, you can't compare the performance of a Java application to something written in Go or Rust in case of Geth and Open Ethereum.
Ian jumped in, and I think he was also thinking Besu. Maybe he understands better why the performance is so slow.
By the way, for anyone that tries to talk, we have to enable push to talk in Discord settings, otherwise it won't work. You will have to map a button to it.
If anyone's having issues, then feel free to drop them in the office hours chat. One of us should pick them up. The last item I have here on the node watch is if there's anything else, any other blockchains, node related topics that anyone wants to talk about this week. Nobody wants to talk about PancakeSwap this week. Well, I want to ask the question which I asked in one of the channels. Nobody was answering. I've seen this supposed implementation that's able to index PancakeSwap faster. I don't want anyone here to speculate on why. I'm just interested to know if we have a a genuine explanation for whether that's real and what they're actually doing in order to speed things up. Does anyone know? We'll just pass on if nobody knows. Okay, let's just leave that then. Right, so where are we at? We're 15 minutes in, so let's move into our new segment, Indexer Stories. Today, I'm glad to say we have Richie and Ian from Index Africa joining us to talk about their experiences around indexing, setting up an indexing operation. By way of an intro, Richie and Ian are from Index Africa. Richie is the indexer lead and has been involved in crypto since 2011. When he was first exposed to Bitcoin, and then subsequently was involved or exposed to Ethereum in 2016. His real-world job is the Chief Digital Officer for various tourism projects, which use online platforms to bring travelers to Africa. Ian is a technical lead and has been involved with computery things since he was a young kid. I imagine that's a theme that spreads amongst many of us. He also got into crypto through early exposure to Bitcoin, and he worked closely with Richie as the CTO of various projects and initiatives. Richie, Ian, welcome to Office Hours. Glad to have you.
Thanks so much, Jim. Thank you for having us.
So I've got a list of questions here, guys, that I'm just gonna, I guess we'll just talk through, and that will sort of form our discussion today. And then we'll, if anybody wants to ask questions as we go, feel free to put your hand up, or just if you have the mic already, then feel free to interrupt us and join in the conversation. So just to kick things off, second biggest continent in the world, right? Where exactly are you guys based at the moment?
So, Jim, we are based both in South Africa, but more specifically, I live in a region in the northeastern parts of South Africa called the Kruger National Park, which is one of the continent's biggest game reserves. And my work in tourism has me living out here full time. And that's how I got to know Ian, is he also found his way down into this neck of the woods, this massive tract of wilderness. And somehow we met up and we started working together. And, it's funny, you go to the furthest places in the world and you find people with the most in common. So that's where we're based.
So if I look at a map of Africa, what am I looking? I mean, can you give me an indication? I'm actually looking at a map right now.
If you're on Google Maps, you just type in Kruger National Park, northeastern South Africa. So pretty far down the continent of Africa, but probably directly in line with the Mozambique town of Inhambane. If you just go west 200 kilometers from there, we're in the Lowveld, which is this depression of land between two big mountain ranges. And many years ago, when people were first discovering Africa, they discovered this region was rich and plentiful of wildlife. And so they proclaimed a national park. And now, sort of 120 years later, the national park is one of our country's greatest natural assets, because so many people from around the world come and visit on safari to see the wildlife and to see the natural beauty.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So you're basically working in the tourism industry. What it's not really on topic, but how have things been for you in the last year with the lockdown, and how has that affected your the businesses that you work in?
I mean, look, it's undoubtedly been pretty tough times. We're a very mature business, so we're able to weather the tide, so to speak. But we're optimistic that things are really starting to get a bit of momentum now, and hopefully tourism is gonna rebound in the next kind of 18 months. But it's slow going, and I think one of the big drivers behind me accelerating our move into indexing is really just diversifying more into a space of technology as a way to contribute to our country.
Got it. So Rodrigo gave us a sort of a kernel of genesis for you guys when it comes to the graph. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to get involved?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to it that really stimulated my interest in it, and one was the broader shift of Web3 and the move towards decentralization. I think there's so many philosophies around it that are super appealing, around the disintermediation of many aspects of our world today. So that was kind of the high level side of it. And then certainly just in conversations with Rodrigo over the last 18 months and watching the evolution of the graph, I just thought that there was something so interesting around this idea of the protocol being used as a tool that could enable so much more, a renaissance of sorts. And that's I guess what led me to research it more and get into it more, and then obviously progress from being a curator on the testnet and then moving towards setting up our own indexing node.
Interesting. So where does Ian, where do you come into the picture in this sort of the genesis story of Index Africa?
So as Rich mentioned, I met him 3 or 4 years ago, no longer. Also while having made my way down and getting to live in the closest thing to Eden that I think we have on Earth, which is also in the Kruger National Park. So I met Rich, and then we've been working on projects together ever since, and we shared a love of technology and all things new almost. And then when Rich was telling me about the graph and what Rodrigo had been telling him, then it was just kind of a natural progression that it was something that we had to get involved in.
I think if I can jump in here, Jim, and also just comment, I think that there was such a watching the progress of it, there was such an opportunity just from a geographic perspective, just from being people in Africa who were aware of it. There was certainly the objective to look at being a first mover in Africa, and of expanding the broader mission of the Graph protocol by being able to set up infrastructure here on the continent to support the bigger mission.
Yeah, I guess that's a big challenge, I imagine, in your space. I guess the technology space must be very mature now, especially in South Africa. In terms of infrastructure that's available to you. We must be talking top tier at this point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll let Ian jump into a little bit more of the setup that we have. But South Africa's got wonderful infrastructure. We have had a bit of a challenge with the Suez Canal blockade, which caused a bit of a delay on some of our new gear. But it's really good kit here.
Yeah, if I may interrupt in there. We've come a long way in what seems to be a very short amount of time, particularly with regards to connectivity in the country. Not even 5-6 years ago, we were still very much predominantly an ADSL or a DSL based country, where since then we've made massive progress in the laying of fiber, having great backhauls across the country, redundant backhauls, and great international breakouts. So we've got a great kind of setup now, which enables us to actually compete internationally without price, which used to be a huge prohibiting factor, now not being such a thing that is a hindrance at all.
Reminds me very much of my early days in the technology world, working for startups in Australia, where you were stuck with what are they called now? The Telnet? Is it Telnet? The big incumbent, like level 0 internet providers or tier 0 internet providers there. If they go out, then everything goes out. There's no backhaul redundancy at all, and these are things that are really, when you're talking about running a service that's running 24/7, and every minute that you're down and you're not serving queries is potentially lost revenue, then having that level of infrastructure is just absolutely critical.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I remember the days of 64K Diginet lines that we'd lease over copper that would cost an absolute fortune per month, and it all being routed through 1 or 2 providers. So that has definitely made it much easier for us. As Richie said as well, the actual data centers and things we have now are absolutely world class. Numerous independent providers, big international companies setting up big data centers, which is also just great for the industry because it gives us those facilities that are elsewhere in the world. But interestingly enough, today I read that on the Suez Canal delays is that South Africa is at the moment seeing the biggest delay in getting components and little parts of computer equipment, and it's the worst that it's been in 30 years now, thanks to both shipping restrictions from Hong Kong and China outbound, as well as these knock-ons of delays. So it's quite an interesting time to be doing this, but I definitely think it's one worth doing.
Absolutely. The combination of those two or three major events that have been happening. So you've got the things like the Suez Canal blockage. You've also got what was I thinking of? The chip shortage, right? Which is, they're projecting that out into 2022 at this point. Getting hold of stuff at times, especially silicon, can be, new silicon is just frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're experiencing it at the moment with waiting for hard drive storage. That we're having shipped in, and the estimates went from confirmed a couple of weeks to now a couple of months, and it's only going to get worse. Unfortunately at the moment, because there is such a surge in demand now while everybody's getting going again. So it's I think we got in at the right time. I think if we tried this in a month or two's time, we might have sat with even bigger delays.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, the byproducts of what we've set up and started working with now have been a real exercise in bootstrapping and just making things work with what we've got. And that is in no small part helped by many of the people in the Indexer community, particularly our friend Mr. Payne here, for all his support that he's given us as we've got up and running. It's a challenging space to work in, but I think if you've got tenacity and resolve to keep chipping away at things every day, you can get really good setups done.
Are there any other, before we sort of maybe change tack into another subject, are there any sort of unique challenges that you're facing specifically with running infrastructure in Africa, or have we covered that?
I think mainly we've covered it. I think our big focus on a longer term mission is to try and get a consistent and regular sustainable power supply to our servers. That's a work in progress, just because of some of the challenges we've had with blackouts from our power utilities. But generally speaking, our servers are located in Johannesburg, which is a world-class city. And even though we're based remotely, we're operating them out of there. So it's we haven't yet taken the plunge to set up nodes out here in the wilderness. I just think the breakout speeds will be a bit challenging.
Yeah, I mean, you've got all that. Go ahead, Ian.
No, sorry, I was just going to comment that our ETH node would never catch up.
I think we were having a conversation in another chat the other day about that, and talking about how sometimes, especially with the open Ethereum nodes, it's often faster to just ship a hard disk in the mail than it is to actually try and sync some of these things.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
Okay, let's change tack a little bit and talk about your philanthropic work. So I've got a couple of questions here. I think they probably both play into each other, so I'll give you the both and we can just have an open-ended discussion. So the two questions are, what's the backstory of the Good Work Foundation, and how are you using the graph as a platform for community growth and philanthropy?
So the backstory of the Good Work Foundation is my brother-in-law and my wife. They grew up traveling throughout Africa as their parents set up safari destinations across the continent, and they had a traveling teacher that they went with. And as they grew up, they realized that the only difference between the various rural people that they would meet on their travels and people in the first world was simply access to technology and access to education. And that was around about the turn of the millennium. And that was the genesis of the Good Work Foundation, is this idea of providing access to world-class digital education. And being in the safari industry, invariably you're surrounded by local communities in these wild areas, and the need to set up learning centers and set up places for these rural people to get access to digital technology and IT and training, kind of like the right thing to do in around about 2005 when the Good Work Foundation was founded. And since then it's grown slowly and steadily, and it's evolved in the same way that technology and access to technology has evolved. But really the mission is to provide world-class digital access and digital education to rural people in Africa.
That's very interesting. So Richie, how do you see the work with the graph sort of, playing into the role with the Good Work Foundation? Is there a story to be told there?
Yeah, certainly. I think there's a number of components to it. The first is really just the economic component, and the reality is that we and when I say we, I talk about myself and my brother-in-law and my sister are really on the kind of fundraising train year on year to raise the operational funds for the Good Work Foundation. And it's kind of like a relentless treadmill of fundraising, and then you achieve your goals and the money spent, and then you got to raise again for the next year. And so we've been looking at a number of ways to get sustainable fundraising going. And when I saw the sort of like model of the graph economics, where you could set up a node, you could set up a staking facility essentially, and you could earn rewards from that. And based on the excellence of which you are operating your indexing node, so would be the sort of amount of rewards that would come back. It seemed to me like a really good idea to take the idea of turning our indexing node into more of a social enterprise, whereby we would give a portion of all proceeds, all rewards generated each month and each quarter and each year, and use them, instead of fundraising, use them to actually fund the Good Work Foundation.
Yeah, that's a really interesting application of the revenue coming out of I mean, it's the graph, and it's Web3 in general, right? This is a model that many of the projects are trying to make real, and graph is one of the ones that's really at the forefront of that. I think that's really interesting. The idea that rather than needing, potentially needing a massive, what do they call it, like a treasury fund that you're getting the income from or something like that, you actually have the ability to look at other avenues to get income that can then support the charity ongoing, and that gives you time where you don't have to be on the, like you say, on the funding circuit, every day of the year in order to try and make sure that you can keep things running.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think one of the amazing things about the graph model and the rewards model is that it really forces you to look at the idea of capital allocation and how you're effectively going to deploy the capital of your reward to both short-term, medium-term, and long-term investments in new things that are going to continue to grow the ecosystem. So certainly the short-term stopgap of just solving fundraising pains is kind of like a really, really good application of the capital. But I think longer term, what we're essentially wanting to do is grow out the capabilities of the digital learning centers into providing more Web3 related content to these young learners who are coming through. And instead of just teaching them only about how to get an international computer driver's license, we also teach them more about the philosophies and the ideas of Web3, which are abundant, and really get their heads into a space of thinking about how they can be using technology to empower themselves moving forward in the future as they start to grow.
Could I interject here?
Please do.
So from my perspective as like a potential donor to a philanthropic organization, imagine I'm committing, a certain amount of funds of my own to a certain organization. And now imagine, say I wanted to, donate $10,000 to this organization. But then, next year I'd have to come up with an additional 10, gift per year for them to meet their obligations. But say this organization had a node, of their own, or there was a node that was, contributing to them. that $10,000 I could put in, as a delegator to that. And then those rewards would then continuously fund that organization. And then on the same flip side, I would be able to, have access to potentially withdraw if I ever wanted to. It's like a liquid thing that, I could put in and then eventually take out. So there's benefits from a donor side. And then what's really meta about it is that, this is going to fund, people in rural locations that are learning, both about just like having a technological background, but then, furthermore, the background in crypto and blockchain education, and potentially even learning about becoming a curator and eventually an indexer. So imagine, these funds that you're delegating onto the network is then bringing up like the next generation of people that will, further the development of the Graph network. And with the curriculums being developed, in universities and across the globe, there's a wealth of learning that will, be passed on to these people in these rural locations, which is the part of it that I found most exciting and interesting as a novel application of this.
It's a very interesting concept, Rodrigo, and it reminds me of some of the things that I'm starting to see around the wider DeFi space, where some projects are allowing you to do things like direct part of, you talked about, potentially delegating and then the returns from the delegation or the income. You're starting to see DeFi projects that are allowing you to do things like divert part of the income that you might get from lending and borrowing, maybe diverting it to your favorite charity or your favorite cause. So with systems like that, people are far more likely to donate when they see that it's an income, a small trickle of income. And when that small trickle of income is multiplied 100,000 times, and all of a sudden you're talking about serious funding for public goods at the end of the day. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas that Web3 can bring to addressing some of these problems, some of the problems that Richie spoke about funding, being on the funding train all year round and that sort of thing. So this is all very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think there's something really appealing about also the idea of creating a closed loop, where the model becomes self-fulfilling and self-reinforcing, and effectively becomes a flywheel. And the more effective it is, the more it's able to nurture and grow itself.
Yeah. Okay, I've got maybe one more question left, but there's something else I wanted to ask you just briefly. So, in terms of where you guys are on the timeline with your Graph infrastructure, I believe you're already running an indexer, but Ian mentioned there that you're waiting on a lot of Iron or whatever servers coming your way. So I guess you're on the ride on migration, and you're looking, you have plans to expand as well at the same time.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I mean, as soon as our hardware is in, we'll be getting the full node up and running. We are up and running and indexing on mainnet. So we want to participate in testnet as well, so that we getting involved as wherever we can. And yeah, as soon as that's done, then we'll be ramping it up.
Yeah, I think currently, Jim, I'm certainly working quite hard on doing the due diligence across the various nation states in Africa that would be best suited towards node deployment. And it's an interesting playing ground, because some countries are very friendly to it, other countries are completely disinterested. But effectively, it's going to be a combination of the next couple of months of really identifying the right countries to operate in it, the right subgraphs to deploy to those, and the right service providers that can help us get our infrastructure up and running there, so that we can provide the coverage from this region of the world.
So when you're having those conversations, Richie, are you having to sort of frame it separate from the whole crypto, you've got the whole sort of mainstream sort of image of what crypto is. Are you having to sort of sidestep that in order to have these conversations?
Yeah, I think that generally I approach the conversations from the perspective of running technical infrastructure rather than crypto. I think generally whenever I mention crypto to the layman, they immediately go to sort of Bitcoin trading and all of the noise around that, as opposed to broader ideas of what Web3 can achieve. So we're really looking at it from just like infrastructure partners who are able to provide us with the technical goods that we need, and we don't get into too much detail as to the software that we're going to deploy on that.
Exactly, you're a data provider. That's the way I frame it when I'm talking with service companies and financial companies.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think also a lot of there's been a lot of knee-jerk reaction in places in Africa. Who some are more open to it than others. Some know that there's almost the tide that can't be stemmed. It's coming, and they have to adapt to it. And so they're opening up their sort of regulatory playing field and are open to having conversations around it. And it's a moving target, I guess is what I'm saying. But it's also a target ripe for opportunity and ripe for building the right partnerships and the right communities of people. Because there are some wonderful communities, crypto communities, not just in South Africa, but in other parts of Africa as well.
Excellent. So that sort of plays into the final question, and I added a question myself to the list we had, which is, what is the common perception of crypto in Africa in 2021? Is everyone speculating on it? Is it being used to provide better banking services? Is it a mix of speculation and utilization for moving money around and making payments? Generally, what is the temperature on cryptocurrency as you see it today where you live?
Jim, that's a really great question, and I can certainly only give you my opinion, which definitely is my own. I think that there are very sophisticated banking industries and infrastructures and businesses, not just in Southern Africa, but in broader parts of West Africa, which have really dug into the DeFi space, and is where I think you're going to see a lot of traction with adoption of crypto. Coupled with that, I think you have more of a mainstream speculatory hype, which is kind of similar to what we saw in 2016 with the initial Bitcoin bubble and the ETH bubble to a certain extent, of people who are just reading the news and seeing cryptocurrencies and who are trying to get some exposure one way or another to play the speculative market. I think where Africa is trying to bridge the gap is to provide a regulatory framework that allows for the adoption of cryptocurrency to be done in a manner that's mutually beneficial for everyone, so that it doesn't just become an untraceable currency used for money laundering or nefarious purposes. It can actually be used for social good and used as a means of exchange and value exchange. And to that extent, I see a very vibrant community in South Africa that's working across all aspects of the space.
Have we got to the point where we're getting with other Western governments where, the dreaded CBDC is being talked about, the central bank digital currencies? Is your government thinking about that yet? Are they making any noises in that direction?
No, unfortunately not. But I think that'll be driven by other things. Because I think the CBDC thing, and once again, this is just my perception on it. I think what China did a couple of weeks ago with starting their own digital currency, I think we're going to see more nation states saying, look, we want to do it. But I think in Africa, you might find an African continental currency as a means to promote intercontinental trade. That's a very hot topic at the moment, is trying to develop trade amongst different African countries, particularly as the sort of economic landscape's been, starting to emerge in recovery post the COVID world.
Yeah, that's very interesting dynamic. Go ahead, Ian.
If I may just say, what also is quite prevalent in Africa is this migratory working, where one or two members of a family will go to a different country in search of more or better income, but they have to send money back to their families every month. And currently, there's a couple of big companies that really control that whole ecosystem. Companies like Western Union. So I think that this whole space plays very nicely into the movement of money and allowing this sort of transacting to happen easier as we get going. Obviously, we need the regulators to buy into it. But I've heard that our foreign or our Reserve Bank here in South Africa is busy with a project on it. We're not really sure of what that means, but I think it's not seen as the bad person or the bad technology. It's definitely piqued everybody's interest.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, just coupled with that, and sorry if I'm droning on here, Jim, but I think the context of a country like South Africa, where there's an enormous welfare state and the sort of need to get out welfare grants each month, there's massive opportunity for the likes of decentralized apps like Celo to bank the unbanked and to start to put more technological systems in place that allow for the direct exchange of digital currency and digital value that people can start to trade with and exchange with and earn value from.
Excellent. Does anyone else have any questions for Ian or Richie? Okay then, guys, if anyone wants to reach out to either of you, what's the best way to get hold of you?
I think the best way would probably be on our Telegram chat, and I can pop the link in the office hours chat just after the call. Otherwise, on Discord or DM me on Telegram. It's probably the easiest way.
That's great. It's been a very interesting discussion, guys. It's been great to hear about your story and what you're working on. So thanks very much for being the inaugural Indexer Stories. We're going to move on to the next section and have a chat about maybe migration. So again, thank you very much, guys, for your time. Really appreciate that.
Thanks, Jim. I really appreciate you having us on, and thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you from my side as well. Cheers.
Thanks, Ian. So we have about 10 minutes left, guys, and we have two sections, and I'm just wondering if maybe, unless Seb, there's something really critical you want to bring up in Repo Watch, maybe we should use these last few minutes we have to talk about migration.
I don't have critical things in this Repo Watch thing. I just found like these two interesting bits that you can basically disable the agent from like performing any actions. Like we had this case a few times that we would have liked to just not start the agent because we didn't want them to close allocations. And now there's a flag, but obviously it's just a merge pull request, like no release version yet. And some bug fix that prevented people from closing allocations in the first day, basically. Because the agent was not able to close the allocation, since there is this minimum period of 1 day, and we would still disable indexing the subgraph on the index node. Not a big deal, but since we had like those new subgraphs that people were aping in during the last days, it became relevant. So a couple of hours ago, there was a fix pushed and not yet merged to the repo, but from the next release on, we will be able to do this as well.
So is that the backstory forward on that one?
Yeah, I can give a little bit more background there. Basically, what would happen is if you updated your rules and set so that it changed your your strategy, and the agent would then remove a deployment and then close allocations. What was happening previously is it would remove the deployment immediately, which could lead to the case where a POI is not available when trying to close the allocation. So the agent was unable to actually close that corresponding allocation. So this updates it to not stop syncing that subgraph until all the allocations are actually closed.
Right.
There's also another corresponding fix I just pushed in that basically does the same thing in reverse. So it will only allocate on a subgraph if there's a healthy deployment. So it waits for your agent to deploy that subgraph to your indexing infrastructure, and then after it deems that deployment is healthy, then it'll allocate towards it to catch the case where there's a deployment that you're unable to sync.
Hey Ford, I also would like to know more about this gas thing. Like when all the questions are cleared, I really wondered what this refers to.
I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to.
There is one pull request, I'm not sure if it was merged, that mentions that there is gas measuring going on, and this pull request was regarding how much time the index node spends in measuring the gas spent on subs, and
so
refers
that's
to a ticket from December somehow.
Yeah, so I think that is a graph node pull request you're referring to add some features for metering subgraphs. Right now there's a timeouts, so you can set a timeout in graph node, and the subgraph will fail if a mapping takes too long. But
so it's basically
in order to have a more deterministic way of failing a subgraph, we've introduced this gas metering in the mappings.
So basically it's like per handler execution measuring of time spent to determine when the subgraph probably failed.
Yeah, exactly. So that's to set up a consistent way to fail subgraphs across indexers, so that you will fail on a overly expensive subgraph, and that'll happen like consistently across indexers. So you can all agree that a subgraph is too expensive.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, on the previous one, I wanted to ask what exactly is healthy status? Is that it's indexed far enough to the chainhead, or that it's successfully deployed on one of the indexers and it's moving along?
In this case, just that it's deployed and it's moving and it hasn't seen any errors. I could see maybe a custom add-on or a future change that would be a little bit more strict and like wait for that subgraph to be fully synced before allocating towards. But I don't think that's something all indexers will want to do.
No, I think it's quite okay as it is now. It's just to be sure that I understand it correctly. Yeah.
Okay, thanks Ford for the insight there to the PRs. So we have a few minutes left, and let's maybe talk a little bit about migration. So I think certainly if you're an indexer, you're aware that a bunch of new subgraphs, about 10 of them, were introduced last night, and they've all been signaled on to a certain degree, and you are free to start indexing them. Martin has provided an update in the announcements channel, which includes a index or mainnet migration guide, which I'm just going to paste into the chat channel right now. So my plan for the next few weeks to months, 60 days, I guess, with office hours is to try and focus on the phase that we're in, and not spend too much time speculating on the phases that come after. So give people a chance to ask questions or just discuss things around the phase that we're currently in. So what I'm just going to start running through now is what I've pulled out of the indexer's guide. So we've just gone into the phase 1 migration bootstrapping phase, and the sort of too long didn't read of that is that we're syncing new subgraphs, and we need to be contributing to the testing and stabilization of Scalar. So last office hours, Yanis graced us with his presence to discuss Scalar and Vector, and that has been made available on YouTube for anyone who wants to watch it. And additionally, in a more formal Vector workshop was held, a Scalar and Vector workshop was held yesterday, which covered the same topics and gave people a chance to ask more questions, and there were some good questions in there and some good content. That's available on the Graph YouTube channel. We also have more workshops coming up, I believe. On May the 5th, 9 a.m. Pacific, we have disputes and arbitration workshop, which should be interesting. So I guess we get to talk about slashing and the arbitration charter and things like that in that workshop. We also have the protocol town hall coming up, which will play into all of this. I think the emphasis here, at least from my side, is that we all need to be on the testnet, and we all need to be up to date in terms of our software on mainnet as it stands today. But very critically so, we need to be all contributing on testnet, not only to just contribute to testnet and to help Yanis out with load testing, but things have changed a lot since the last builds that are running on mainnet, especially around obviously the state channel stuff. So you really, really want to be on top of that, so that when it comes to the time to deploy Vector on mainnet, you are ready for it. I think that covers everything. There's something in here about sharing API keys with Subgraph consumers. That would be the dApps and the Subgraph devs for initiating channels for Subgraph consumers. So I imagine those API keys, well, I don't actually know much about it. Is there anyone on the call who knows much about this interaction with, I guess it's with the gateway? I guess that's probably in Yanis's wheelhouse. The other one is the introduction of the arbitration charter. Go on, Chris.
I was just going to say that you can generate an API key, or maybe it's that you provide an API key. I want to say to index a service. Yeah, so that might be a reference to that. Basically accepting traffic externally to the gate, the network.
Right. We should probably try and get some clarification on that to make sure there's no gotchas there that will hang us up. The other thing that I had was that the introduction of the arbitration charter, slashing criteria and dispute management, which we will cover in the workshop on May the 5th. So is there anything else anyone wants to discuss regarding migration? Any questions or concerns people have? Feel free to put your hand up if you want me to add you to the audio. No questions. I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign. If there's any other topics anyone wants to cover in the last couple of minutes we have. Everyone's happy with what's happening on.
There's really no questions about the migration, none?
Yeah, I was wondering the same myself, Ford.
Okay.
Is it fair to say that there will be no production traffic on those subgraphs until Vector lands on mainnet?
Yeah, I would. If there is any, it's not really worth worrying about too much. Like the basic plan is to, in phase 1, sync all the subgraphs, and continue to do some heavy testing on testnet. And then in phase 2, start moving Vector onto mainnet, continue heavy testing there, and then start to be supporting production dApps. So in this first phase, the big focus is syncing the subgraphs, making sure your setup is correct, and then we'll be having some workshops on disputes and arbitration process, so everyone can understand that a little bit better. And then we'll move into phase 2 after that.
Will there be any simulated traffic on the new subgraphs on mainnet?
I don't have a definitive answer there. I think there will be some.
Is there any problem with the network subgraph? I'm still seeing allocation already closed, and it's looking open on the network dApp, but in Etherscan it's clearly had its close. So I'm quite unsure.
I can check and I'll tell you after the office hours call.
Does this full text search capability require any features on the ETH nodes or something?
No, those aren't available for the decentralized protocol because they are not yet deterministic, from what I understand. So anyone who allocated against that subgraph will have to nuke their allocations through Remix using their operator wallets.
Yeah, we'll have to turn that discussion over into the Indexer software channel, I think. But yeah, that's if you have allocated to Omen, you need to keep an eye on that because we can't settle allocations on it. Okay, guys, thanks everybody for joining. Thank you to everybody who contributed today. Good luck with your migration work and your test network, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Lovely.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.